wanted to just speak a few minutes about some of the customs that we may see, encounter over Pesach, over Passover, the holiday that's coming up, and just sort of get everybody in gear towards what's coming. Now, most people know that on Pesach, the main prohibition is we're prohibited from chametz. Chametz is any of the 5 grains, wheat, barley, spelt, rye, or oats, that come into contact with water for 18 minutes or more. Now that's what the Torah prohibits, chametz. We're forbidden from partaking of it on Pesach. What many people are aware of, maybe they don't know the details of it, is that those Jews of Ashkenazic descent, the Ashkenazi Jews, are also prohibited from eating what's called kitniyot. Kitniyot it refers to legumes, rice, or other grain-like products. And this is a very, very old custom. It dates to the times of the Geonim, which was about 1,500 years ago. It's one of the older customs that is widespread, that is universally accepted in Ashkenazic, amongst Ashkenazic Jewry. Sephardim, those from Sephardic countries, usually eat most types of kitniyot, although there are actually different customs as to exactly what's included and what is not included. On Pesach, so chametz has a unique prohibition because usually with most foods that are not kosher or most foods that are prohibited, usually it's just a prohibition from eating. Chametz actually carries additional prohibitions with it as well. Chametz you're not allowed not only to eat, but you're not even allowed to own it, and you're not even allowed to benefit from it. Meaning you can't feed it to your dog. So no owning, no benefiting, and no eating. Kitniyot, on the other hand, the only prohibition with kitniyot is that you're not allowed to eat it. You're allowed to own it, you're allowed to benefit from it. The prohibition wasn't extended that far. Now, why was it that the rabbis in that time, those sages of that time, 1,500 years ago, established in those communities that these legume products should be prohibited as well? There's several reasons. We'll go over 3 tonight. The first one that's mentioned in the Tur, it's also brought down in the Mishnah Brura, is that chametz grains could accidentally, at that time especially, could have accidentally mixed with kitniyot grains. It's very practical that especially in the colder countries, these grains were stored together in order to get them through the bitter winters. So you had the kitniyot grains and the chametz grains that were stored together. The rabbis of the time were afraid that the grains would actually get mixed up. A second reason that's brought down is that the products that wheat or actual chametz grains produce resembles things that kitniyot products produce. For example, cornbread. Corn is not chametz, but corn is a product that's prohibited under kitniyot. And cornbread looks or has the same texture, similar feel to it as regular bread. And a person may get confused or may forget themselves, and so they said that this is prohibited. In order that a Jew should avoid having actual chametz, they didn't want even products that looked like chametz. And the last reason that we'll discuss tonight, that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, also Rabbi Ephraim Greenblatt brings it down. He says that the raw kitniyot grains look very similar to regular grains, and that could cause confusion as well. So it's the fact that they could actually get mixed up. It's that the products look the same, the cornbread and the regular bread, for example. And the last thing is that the grains actually look similar, and one could potentially get mixed up. Now, what foods are included in this prohibition? You know, the idea, how it's usually defined, legumes, is a little bit of a misnomer. Some of the things that are included are rice, buckwheat, millet, beans, lentils, corn, peas, sesame seeds, and mustard. Although the Taz in the Shulchan Aruch writes in his commentary that it's actually difficult to define exactly what fits into that category. Things like coffee, tea, and garlic are typically not considered kitniyos and are eaten, but there's other communities that don't eat those things. Peanuts and peanut oil, some do, some don't. It's brought down. Different communities have different customs regarding those as well. So it's difficult to pinpoint universally what exactly are the stringencies that different communities have adapted to themselves over the years. But the general idea that there are some products called kitniyos that are prohibited for the reasons that we discussed. Now, the time to refrain, the prohibition of chametz, of eating chametz, doesn't begin right when Pesach begins, that night. It actually starts Erev Pesach, earlier on in the day. And that's typically when kitniyos is prohibited from as well. So don't eat, if you are of Ashkenazic descent, don't have cornbread Erev Pesach afternoon. Don't have any other kitniyos product. Now, in our history, in Jewish history, in difficult times, times of emergency, where food was hard to come by, there have been times where the rabbis of the day, the great rabbis of the day, had permitted Jews to eat, not chametz, but to eat kitniyos, given those particular situations, when, again, food was difficult to come by. In 1771, in 1772, and in 1810, there was a famine in Germany, and some communities permitted their community to eat kitniyos because food was just hard to come by. In 1942, the Rabbanut, the rabbinical council in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, also allowed eating kitniyos because of the hardship that people were facing. Even when the situation arises, even in these emergency situations or difficult situations, these difficult scenarios, people still are expected to be careful that the grains should not get mixed up and that the kitniyos that they're eating is not in any way connected with actual chametz. Now, this prohibition that was instituted 1,500 years ago and has been observed very strongly ever since, is described as a permanent decree, as not something that was just sort of apropos for the times. It's something that's meant to last generations, and really has. The Tshuva Me'ahava says that even if the rabbinical court, the Beis Din of Elijah the prophet himself, were to reconvene, they would not be able to overturn the prohibition of kitniyos that was established by those sages back then. It's very much a part of the Ashkenazic world. The Maharil also speaks very strongly about one who violates this custom. You have to ask yourself, you think to yourself for a moment, that decree was 1,500 years ago. It's why the severity? Elijah, the prophet himself, his court couldn't overturn it. And one has to ask why. It's not a biblical prohibition. It's not even Talmudic. It's, quote-unquote, simply a custom. One thing we always have to remember is that when the sages establish a decree, when they make up something prohibited that in previous generation was not, there are two layers to the prohibition. One is a simple or practical prohibition, reason for the prohibition. Like we mentioned earlier, grains are prohibited, kitniyos are prohibited because they resemble grains, or because they could get mixed up with grains, or because the byproducts, what they produce, is similar to what grains produce. Those are the simple, practical reasons why kitniyos are not allowed. But just like all of the decrees of our sages, especially our sages of 1,500 years ago, who were endowed with a certain divine insight, a divine intuition, there is an essential or spiritual reason why the sages decree it, either for the Jewish people as a whole or for a specific community. And sometimes, us looking back, we think to ourselves, well, those external prohibitions, they don't exist anymore. We can control it. We have ways that we can modify it. And that may be true, but the inner spiritual reason, the essential reason that the decree was made, the spiritual reason, is still as present as it always was, and we have no right to rescind it and to counteract a tradition that has such a long history. An interesting idea that I saw connected with this of kitniyot. It's not a topic that people research a lot or think too much about when they're observing their customs, but an interesting idea nonetheless is that Pesach, it represents godless hadas, expansive, great knowledge. It celebrates our consciousness, our awareness of the birth and cosmic significance of the Jewish nation and of our national destiny. That we are our people, that we have a plan, there's a mission to this world, there's a beginning, there's an end, and that we're guided towards a purpose. Pesach is the celebration of the birth of that. And because of that, on that day, our consciousness is expanded. Godless hadas. Something that's been said, it's an interesting point, is that kitniyot has a similar root, kuf, tes, nun, to the word katan, which means shrinking, smallness, a small-mindedness, if you will. That we avoid kitniyot to avoid small-mindedness. That sometimes where we would get stuck in the trees instead of missing the forest and miss the forest. Sometimes in our own interactions or in our own behavior as Jews, we get caught up in all the minutia and we ignore or forget our national destiny, where we're going, what our purpose in this world is, and get caught up with all sorts of sillinesses. So we avoid kitniyot to avoid the small-mindedness that is counterintuitive to what Pesach represents and the energy that we're endowed with. Whatever your custom is, realize that there's a much deeper layer than we often consider, and embrace your customs that your family has, or your region, that your cultural traditions, and most importantly, have a happy and kosher holiday.